Hey everyone, so Sam Harris actually released his talk with the vicious liar named Omer Aziz, and in his podcast, demolished claims about him losing against Omer or hiding stuff from everyone. Now, just for context, Omer Aziz wrote an article for Salon which grossly misrepresented Sam's views and had numerous out-and-out lies which were unfathomable.
So, the problem for me in general, just to step back before we get into the text here, is that I understand Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi better than you understand me and Majid. And I can actually say this with certainty because you are absolutely wrong about me and Majid. And I could ascribe beliefs to al-Baghdadi at random and do a better job than you've done here. I could throw the I Ching and come to a better understanding of his motives than you have come to an understanding of ours by reading and reviewing our book.
The only thing I want to say to that is I think I understand Baghdadi better than you and Majid understand Baghdadi, because I actually factor in to account his political strategy and his geostrategic policy that he's had in Syria and in Iraq that's allowed al-Qaeda in Iraq.
Shut up. That was a blatant non sequitur. Sam was mentioning how wrong he was about Sam and Majid, and then he brought up a totally irrelevant point. That is one regressive left tactic of dodge and deflect, and a perfect way to do so would be through a non sequitur. Another example would be,
Sam, I don't care about your motives, though. I don't like. For me, it's what the book says.
No,
right?
Bullshit.
Bullshit. He's such a huge liar. On his first article, the first sentence was about the get-rich-quick scheme of writing about reforming Islam. In his newest article, he was talking about how simply writing about Islam will sell books and expand platforms. His other lies include Sam dehumanizing Muslims to such an extreme degree that it verges upon bloodlust. How many of you think that he actually believes that? He also went on to call Sam a white supremacist, which I'm sure that even notable regressive leftists like Glenn Greenwald doesn't believe. Now I could keep on refuting Omer's facile points. However, I'll never do as good a job as Sam, so ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Harris.
Now, paradoxically, my claim that the podcast was too boring to release is no longer true, right? Because given all the controversy, and given the charges that Omer has leveled at me, given the speculation that he might have defeated me in a debate and revealed my ignorance of all things Islamic, the podcast is suddenly very interesting to many of you. Not to me, but to you. So, I've decided to adapt to these changes and release the podcast. But before I do, I want to give you a few facts. I was absolutely clear with Omer about the format of this conversation in advance, about my reasons for insisting upon it, and about the fact that I might ditch the whole podcast if we proved unable to have a productive conversation. Now, as you'll hear, we discussed the possibility of my not airing the podcast at the very end of the conversation, in a surprisingly collegial way, given how ugly this aftermath has become. And he seemed to understand. Now, on this point you should know, I've been on the receiving end of this sort of thing many times before. For instance, I once sat with Robert Wright, the journalist with whom I've had many disagreements, for a 2-hour interview on his video podcast, The Meaning of Life TV. Now, to my knowledge, that conversation never saw the light of day. I have no idea why. It has never once occurred to me in the intervening years to cry censorship. And Robert never explained why he didn't release the podcast. And he never told me that was a possibility. I once sat for an hour in the NPR studios and spoke with Guy Raz for his TED Radio Hour about the talk I gave at TED on the foundations of morality. Guy killed the episode because he had trouble finding another speaker to, quote, balance my views. Now, I found this annoying. It is annoying, but never in a million years would it occur to me to think that Guy had infringed on my freedom of speech. Nor would it occur to me to publish an article in Salon alleging that Guy had said some extraordinarily hateful and embarrassing things in our conversation as a way of trying to force him to release it as the only way to clear his reputation, which is what Omer has done to me. Okay, first, I have been hiding something. My decision not to publish this was, by definition, a decision to hide something. I've been hiding a fruitless and surprisingly painful waste of my time. Okay, and very early in this conversation, you'll hear my patience begin to fray. In fact, I don't start with a lot of patience. Because remember, I was talking to someone who had already proved to be amazingly dishonest in what he wrote about my book with Majid. He wrote a viciously stupid review in Salon to begin with. And this is why I wanted to talk to him. But once I started getting wrapped around the axle with him, in attempting to discuss his review, I got very annoyed. And that certainly didn't help the conversation get on track. And I absolutely consider that a failing of mine. This is not who I want to be in the world. And it's not who I want to be on my own podcast. In fact, when I declared the broadcast too boring to release, that wasn't quite accurate. Okay, the truth is, I found it too boring to even review. Okay, I started to listen to it, but I found that I just could not bear to spend any more time with Omer. Really with me and Omer. I hate who I was with Omer being. Okay, and not to demonize Omer. I think that most of this behavior on his part is probably unconscious. Most of the time he's going off point and being effectively evasive. I don't think he even knows what he's doing. He's very articulate, and he has these chunks of language on the hard drive he wants to download. But the true things he says are usually irrelevant, and the relevant things he says are usually false. And that is a toxic comment. He claims that I said things I didn't say. He read into my silences other things I don't believe and would never say. He claims to have demonstrated my ignorance on topics about which I'm not ignorant, and which were among the many irrelevant points he raised and we barely touched. But most incredible of all, he said that somewhere in this conversation you are about to hear, I, quote, demonized Muslims to such an extreme degree that it verged on bloodlust, and that I communicated in some way that, quote, Muslim-looking or brown-skinned bodies were of no human value to me. Now, I don't know how he thought he could get away with that. Okay, the man, and he is a man, he's not a teenager. He's a journalist in his 20s getting his law degree at one of the best law schools on earth. Okay, he's published in the New Republic and the New York Times. He's an adult, and he is attempting to destroy my reputation by alleging that I said things I didn't say in a conversation that was recorded. Okay, and I have the recording, which I can choose to release, as I'm doing now. And he did this so that I would release it. What on earth was he thinking? Well, I'll tell you what I think he's thinking. I think Omer understands that he is writing primarily for an audience that does not care whether or not he is honest. They just want to see the people they disagree with demonized. And this is the audience that Glenn Greenwald writes for, and Chris Hedges, and Reza Aslan. And I'm afraid Omer is right. But that's not my audience. Okay? And when you guys tell me that I've done something that makes me look less than honest, that matters to me. A lot. Many people have declared that I broke my promise to Omer by releasing those clips. Okay? I said I wouldn't edit him, and now I have. But of course, I only released those clips to respond to the false charges he's now made in multiple articles online. In any case, you and Omer are now getting the whole podcast.